pods and on and on. These are social creatures, all of them, and they have a complex social economy, interaction. They learn, as we do, to recognize socially threatening or problematic situations. They learn how to comfort, to give care, to give protection. Even baboons, for example, know that it's wrong for, say, a juvenile baboon to steal food from an infant. And a baboon will come along and smack the juvenile, take the food away, and give it back to the infant. You know, that's unjust. And the thief will be shunned for, you know, the next day or two. One sees a moral economy, not just in humans. And the point of bringing these cases to mind is that none of these creatures has any language at all. They can't express any sentence, imperative. Whatever's going on in that case isn't a case of rules and following rules. There's also a story that I got to tell you. You guys all know about the Colbert Report. Love that guy. Well, here's an example of why. He had on as an interviewee on one of his shows. This goes back 5 years ago. And I forget the guy's name. I think it was Lynn Westmoreland. And he was a Georgia senator. I don't mean a federal senator from Georgia. I mean, he was part of the Georgia legislature. And he was on the show because he wanted to defend the right of the local governments to portray the 12 Commandments, you know, etched on brass, on marble things in the courtyards of the legislature. Yes, thank you. I should have gotten a button on here. And there had recently been a court finding that mandated the removal of the 12 Commandments from some courthouse in Louisiana. And Lynn Westmoreland came on and well, why should we allow this? And Westmoreland said, because the 12 Commandments, sorry, 10? 10 Commandments. Moses dropped 2 of them on the way down the mountain and they shattered. That's right. 10 is close enough, 12. Because the 10 Commandments are the basis of morality, insofar as we have any morality, and their public display in places like courtrooms and schools can only serve to enhance the cause of morality. Colbert, sensing an opportunity here, says, I see. Could you name them for us, Senator? Well, plainly taken aback by the question, Westmoreland gamely started off and he said, well, don't lie. And Colbert put up one finger. Don't steal. Don't kill. ... And then he sort of sunk and said, no, I'm sorry, I can't name them all. At which point Colbert stood up and said, thank you very much, Senator, and brought the whole thing to, you know, a roaring, laughter-filled conclusion. And that really was an interesting episode. But what makes it relevant here is that Lynn Westmoreland, whatever his evangelical enthusiasms, is probably as decent a moral character as you're likely to meet at the post office lineup or at the grocery lineup when you're buying groceries. And after all, he thought morality important enough to defend it in public and get himself elected, and is probably as good a moral character as you're going to find on the average street corner. And yet, plainly, if he did enjoy that status, it wasn't because he had at his fingertips a list of rules that told him how to behave. Something else is going on. Something utterly different from the standard story about rules. Well, what? There are already, in the philosophical tradition, examples from history. Go back to Aristotle, who talks about the slow acquisition of skills. You talk about contemporary moral philosophers who do what are called virtue ethics. What you learn are not a set of rules which you can say, okay, I got them, I'll keep them in my breast pocket. I'm reborn, I'll be good from now on. No, what you do is slowly acquire virtues, which are of some complexity, which are often inarticulable. We try to articulate them over the dinner table. What you're learning are prototypical examples of moral or of immoral behavior, of virtuous, friendly behavior. And this, of course, finds contact with other areas of learning. Does a star basketball player have a list of rules about how to be a star point guard? Of course not. Excuse me, I've got to go. Oh, yes, I've got the ball. There's 3 seconds left. It says, sorry, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way for chess champions. It doesn't work that way for being a skilled musician. Many of the complex skills that we learn slowly to display are not the kinds of skills that can be captured in a set of articulable rules. There would be too many rules. Something else is going on. What's going on? Well, here's where the brain comes in, because the standard stories about how brains represent the world, by standard, I mean the ones that have emerged in the last 18 or 20 years in neural network modeling examples, the standard stories suggest that the world representation doesn't have a linguistic form at all. What kind does it have? Well, I'm going to spare you that lecture, but to make contact with concepts you already have, what the brain learns is prototypical examples. Prototypical examples of colors, of fruits, of voices, of vices, of good basketball plays, of beautiful sonatas. You learn prototypes and you carve up the world, or you parse the world by estimating the proximity of the things you perceive to the prototypes that you already have in place. And these prototypes are embodied in 100 trillion synaptic connections that make up your brain. They're embodied in high-dimensional maps of the abstract structure that reality takes. There are indeed forms of understanding and forms of perception, as Kant said. But according to this guy, they are acquired by a process known as Hebbian learning. All animals do it, including us. And it is a perfectly wonderful process, and it's plastic. It allows us to come up with different conceptual frameworks depending upon the world in which we live or the education in which we've been immersed. This makes me excited. Our models are going to get better and better. We're going to be able to make neural network models. I'm here not thinking of Watson, that IBM program that had a victory on Jeopardy recently. That is an example of good old-fashioned AI. That goes through millions of rules at a clock frequency of 100 megahertz or something like that. That is not using the kind of technology that terrestrial brains use. When we do start to make artificial brains, I presume they'll be electronic. That means that they will operate 1 million times faster than biological brains do. That's a little bit scary, because you can live a cognitive life, in 12 minutes if you're that kind of a machine. That would take you a lifetime to live if you were a biological creature. But the technology will be useful. I don't mean to scare you with thoughts of zombies running around taking over the world. If we can make devoted things to diagnose diseases, to measure the health of an economy, to predict the weather or to predict earthquakes, these will all be very happy things that we can do. They will be, once more, welcome incursions of several sciences: electronic sciences, computational sciences, cognitive sciences. Even Kant, for heaven's sakes, is going to be responsible for some of what's going on here, because according to this view, how you perceive the world, how you think of the world, is utterly, utterly determined by the conceptual and perceptual resources you bring to the world. this may leave us with a worry about the phenomenal world versus the noumenal world, but you have to pay me money if you're going to get a lecture from me on that topic. What I'll do is maybe bring things to a close here. That is to say, my brief history of some of the intellectual developments that have captured me and have evolved interactions between philosophy and the sciences and one another. This story is a story that I'm very grateful for because I managed to go along for the ride. As Pat and I often say, God, it's so lucky we came to San Diego. We only had boogie boards, but we managed to catch a wave that carried us for a long way. And of course, it's going to go on carrying people because all of these intellectual endeavors continue to unfold. And even those of us who are getting too old and tired and sick and stupid to do much in the way of pushing it forward anymore, are looking back over our shoulders at our former graduate students and our younger colleagues who are pursuing this sort of a wild ride themselves. It's going to be fun to watch you guys, and thank you all for coming.